Hey everybody, this is Dream, and today we're gonna go ahead and get into today's slate. It's actually at 1:35 Eastern today, so I'm gonna go ahead and get this video out early so that you can get the information you need to make a good lineup today. So for pitchers, we really only have three guys that I'm really looking at, and then I'm gonna have two other guys that I'm gonna kind of give you as an option, as an alternate, and then I'll tell you a couple guys that we want to avoid totally and maybe get hitters against. So obviously the number one pick is going to be Shohei Ohtani. I mean, there's this, yeah, he's only had 2 games all season long where he didn't score 20 fantasy points basically. So he's pretty much my all-time lock for today. He's probably the best player overall. He's got the highest upside. He's got a great matchup against Detroit. Then there's two pitchers I kind of like, and probably like one a little bit more than the other, but they're both decent, and you can pay down a little bit for the second one if you really need to. But that's Brandon Woodruff and Charlie Morton. And so Morton's 8,600. You know, he's been a little bit hit and miss sometimes, and Woodruff is 10,000, which again, he's been a little hit and miss, but they're both really good pitchers. They don't have the best matchups, but Atlanta's been rolling. Houston's been having trouble hitting anybody out in Atlanta. And then Woodruff has got a tough matchup against the Cubs, but I mean they have some good hitters, but he might be able to handle them for the most part. He's probably my second favorite pitcher behind Ohtani, but I feel pretty confident with all three of those guys to be pretty decent. Maybe you're gonna have Ohtani and then a guy that gets like 15, but with the way that a lot of these other pitchers are, you're probably not gonna have a whole lot of risk of getting overtaken by a couple of dudes that get like 15 from between Woodruff or Morton. So there's a lot of kind of very lackluster pitching today. There are one pitcher that I wanted to mention also is Joe Ryan, and the reason I want to mention him is because he either scores 20 fantasy points or he gets under 10. And his stats on the season, at 9 out of the 19 starts, he's got over 20, and 8 out of the 19 starts, he's under 10. So keep that in mind. He could be a wild card that you could throw a dart at if you needed to really save money. I don't really recommend him just because it's kind of got a little bit of a tough matchup. I don't like people against Texas, but you might want to, throw a flyer item in a GPP or something like that and hope that he gets the 20 that he's been getting a lot. But granted, remember his his floor is super low, so you gotta be careful with him. Another player I actually want to mention just for the craziness of the stats is Zach Thompson for Pittsburgh. Now, he's not a good pitcher. There's only one redeeming quality for him. He's playing against Cincinnati. And in 2 games against Cincinnati, one at Cincinnati, one away, you can see his stats here. He's 1-0, 2 starts. He's given up 3 hits in 11 innings, and he's got 9 total strikeouts. So you're looking at 4.5 strikeouts here. But he's not giving up any runs. He's got 3 walks, and he's averaging 21 fantasy points per game. Both games right around 20. And I will show you that here. 21.5 and 21.1. Now, do you want to use Zach Thompson? Probably not, but you could throw him in a dart in a GPP, and if he hits that 21, man, you could really pay up for some other guys. And I'm going to kind of tell you, too, is that might be useful because there's some dudes that are not, there's some positions where there's not a whole lot of value. So, it's kind of a weird day. You will notice that I kind of avoided Alex Manoah and Nestor Cortes. They're going up against each other. Obviously, Cortes is a bit better pitcher than Manoah has been this season, but I'll be honest, like Cortes has kind of have the tougher matchup in this case because the Yankees have been garbage lately. So if you wanted to use a guy from that game, I would say neither. Really, there's just too many other better options when it comes to Ohtani and Woodruff and Morton. But if you had to use one, I would actually just use Manoah and just hope that the Yankees continue just to be crap because they've been bad. 14 out of the last 17 games they've lost. So maybe you can sneak a Manoah in there and pull a rabbit out of a hat. But I still really wouldn't recommend it. But I just thought I'd mention it because of the wackiness of the season for the Yankees. For the 4 pitchers that I want to, or actually 5 pitchers I want to target pretty good. I mean, actually, there's quite a few, but these are the top 5. Mike Minor for Cincinnati. with Pittsburgh. Ryan Yarbrough for Tampa Bay. He's only had 2 games where he didn't give up an earned run. Eduardo Rodriguez of Detroit. He's only had one 20-point game this season. And then Ahiria for Texas and Buto for the New York Mets. Buto, it's his first start. Sorry, I don't know how to say these guys' names. And for Texas, his starter, he's only started once so far. Now, he did okay in that start, but he is actually the worst pitcher on the market today based on his expected runs for the opposing team. So you do want to kind of keep that in mind. Here's that dude, Ahira, sorry. He did a pretty decent game this first game, but again, it was not against a tough opponent. It was Oakland. He had 6 strikeouts, but he still gave up 3 earned runs and a home run. So, what does that say? At any rate, those are the pitchers today. You have a couple other guys that you could target, like Zach Greinke and Kyle Gibson. But all of those guys have potential to actually be decent, but it's just, most of the time this season they haven't been. So that's pretty much all I got for that. So let's go ahead and get into the catchers. So we have a few good catchers today. Not as many as I'd like to have, and there's a potential that a couple of these guys won't play or, may not be in the starting lineup. So just bear that in mind. And I have a couple alternatives in mind as well, if in case like 2 or 3 of them are actually not starting. Catcher is kind of the one position where a lot of times guys are left out of lineups, so you just have to kind of be careful with that. So my top pick is going to be Travis d'Arnaud, who actually hit the walk-off yesterday in Atlanta as a pinch hitter. He's just way underpriced for his production when he starts, and he's been playing pretty solid, so especially with the game winner last night. And of course, it is an early game, but he is a pretty good option, and he's cheap. So, not only is he probably one of the better options on the board, but he's also very inexpensive. So if he starts, to me, he's almost a must-play, almost. Except for the fact that Atlanta is not real great in the day games. He's just been balling. So, another pick that if you want to pay up a little bit more, we could look at Alexandria Kirk for Toronto. Obviously, it's a tough matchup against Cortez, but he's a decent batter, and he's, definitely more expensive. But if Travis d'Arnaud excuse me, I don't know why I call him Darnaud, but Darno, if he doesn't play, then you could potentially go to Kirk. Then a couple other options you have is Jonah Heim. Again, obviously he didn't play yesterday like I'd hoped, but he's a pretty solid option if you want to pay down. Per guy is $3,600, and he's got a pretty decent matchup, and he has home run potential. And then if you really want to pay up at catcher, which I don't really think is necessary today, especially if all these dudes play, you could look at JT Realmuto. He's a pretty solid option to get hits and stuff like that, and that's pretty much what I have from that position today. Obviously, another option is Williams Contreras if Travis d'Arnaud doesn't play or if he DHs, but I don't really have him set really just because it's not certain that he's going to even play today. For first base, we actually have 7 different guys that I've targeted, and first base is extremely deep today, and you're going to notice that several of the other positions are pretty weak. So without further ado, I'm going to get into these particular positions, but there's just so many guys at first base that you could like today, so just bear with me on that. So my first guy is going to be Vogelbach for the Mets. He has some pretty good upside with his home run hitting ability and stuff like that, and he's got a pretty good matchup with Gibson. And so I actually kind of like him, and he's actually $3,800, so he's pretty inexpensive as well. Another guy who's probably a decent alternate, and probably be the first alternate for me, will be Nate Lowe. We used him yesterday, he paid off, and so, just, ride that wave, right? The next guy that I really like is Luis Arias. I might actually like him a little bit more than Nate Lowe, but they're both kind of in the same range of me liking them. So, and he's got a better matchup, obviously. But he has got a really high batting average. So you're going to get points with him most of the time. He bats pretty well. Some cheap alternates are going to be Vinny Pasquantino for the Kansas City Royals against Yarborough. He's got some upside there. He's been really batting the ball pretty well. He's had some really high-scoring games, and so you do have some potential there for some high-scoring games. Another one is Michael Chavis. He's probably a little bit weaker than Pasquantino, so just keep that in mind. But he does have some upside today. He does hit some home runs, and Pittsburgh has a good matchup. The two expensive guys that I'm going to mention is Rhys Hoskins and Pete Alonso. They both are expensive. They both have high upside today, specifically with their favorable matchups. But again, there's a lot of cheap options at first base, so I'm not certain that you really need to go to them. But those are the guys I like the most at first base. For second base, I don't have a ton here because it's a little bit weaker on these other utility positions. So my top favorite pick is actually Jorge Polanco. Now he had a goose egg yesterday, but he had 5 at bats, which is crazy. But hopefully he can redeem himself and get a 10 or 15 point game today. Hopefully hit a home run. He's kind of my top play, but Luis Arias is also right up there, and they're almost exactly the same price. $39,000 and $4,000. The benefit with Arias is that he can play first or second base. So if you want to, if you really liked him at first base, well, you can actually move him to second base and throw in somebody else at first. But then you may not be able to put in our actual home run bomber from yesterday, Vaughn Grissom, who just absolutely pummeled Houston yesterday with 2 hits, with a home run and RBI. And he kept us in the game, the Braves, I should say, in the game during the game. So he's definitely an interesting option. He's been batting pretty well. He's had a couple games, 2 and 3 points, but man, he's also been lighting it up as well. Averaging 11 points with that many games under his belt is the first time in the majors. And he's only $2,100, which could allow you to pay up for some other guys. My fourth pick for second base and my last pick is going to be Kevin Newman. He's not going to get home runs or anything, but he's going to get some hits sometimes. Yesterday got walked, and he actually struck out more than he normally does. So there's some risk with him. And like I said, you don't really have any home run upside with him either. But he is kind of safe, and he's pretty inexpensive. But honestly, from that perspective, I'm probably I'd rather take a chance that Vaughn Grissom gets another crazy hit again than maybe rely on Kevin Newman. But he's just an option there. It's not really the best second base day as it is sometimes, but overall, I don't think you can go wrong with any of the 3 top guys I mentioned there. So at third base, we have a couple guys that are pretty decently priced. Jose Miranda, he's my top pick, at least for the most part. He's going against a rookie pitcher, and he's got home run potential and stuff like that. He's been batting the ball really well lately. Luis Arias from Milwaukee, also a really solid option today. Though he doesn't have the best batting average, and he hasn't been perfectly great as of late. He has some home run potential, and when he does hit, man, it's really good. So then I have a couple alternate cheaper players as well. Donovan Solano for the Reds. I don't really like him all that much, but I kind of just felt like I had to include him because he's got some home run potential in this position against a weaker pitcher that, again, has done good against the Reds, but he's just a good hitter. And so, as you can see, 320, so might be a decent play. The other play that I didn't ever think I would use, but it just, the situation kind of fits for him, is Luis Rengifo. He's been really good as of late, actually, despite the fact that the Angels are pretty garbage, especially when they didn't have Trout. Of course, they have Trout back now, but he has some potential to really, do something today. He's not my favorite play. I would definitely go with Miranda over him, but he's a pretty decent option. As for the pay up guy, Austin Riley, now you can't really go wrong with this dude. He's been pretty solid this season. He had a little bit of a streak where he's at 4 or 5, 6 points, He's getting walked more, so that's part of it in some of those games. And he didn't hit a home run for a little while, but he did hit one against Houston the other day. So look for him to maybe potentially get some more hits. The pitcher today, Ugarte, he's pretty tough to. Well, he does get strikeouts, but he also gives up runs. So that's kind of the best way I can say it for him. So third base is actually pretty good. There's pretty good options there. As for shortstop, we're going to go back to really not having a lot of great cheap options. In fact, I would almost estimate that you probably should pay up for one of the four guys I'm going to mention here, as well as, or if you really want to go cheap here, the only real cheap option available is Kevin Newman, who I mentioned already. So just keep that in mind because it's not the greatest options for this particular shortstop position today. All right, so my top pick is Corey Seager for Texas. Granted, him is kind of not my top pick, but it is because Lindor is right up there as well, and he's actually got the better matchup. But Seager's got a little bit more upside, I say. And then also Bobby Witt Jr. for Kansas City. He's got some probably the least safe of the three that I mentioned, and he's also the least expensive of the three I mentioned so far. But he's still a decent option. And then if you really want to, move away from those guys, you could go to Dansby Swanson. He's got some good upside, and of course he's going up against Houston, so you have to keep that in mind. So I think he's a good fourth option if you don't really like Seager or Lindor. I probably like Lindor the most overall, and then Seager, then Witt, and then Swanson. So just take your pick on whoever you like the most there. None of them have the greatest pitching situations, but they also there's nobody that really has that today. So at that particular position, that's that you can get fantasy points out of. In the outfield, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 guys selected here. So another issue with outfield is we actually don't have a ton of cheap dudes. So I'm just going to go off with my 5 favorite players, and then we'll get into the rest. So my top 5 players are Tyler Ward for the Angels, who's actually pretty inexpensive at $3,700, and Mark Canha for the Mets at $3,500, and Brandon Nimmo at $4,600, and then Harold Ramirez at $3,500, and Ronald Acuna at $5,400. I think if you mix and match those 5 guys into your 3 positions outfield, you'd probably be okay. But here's some alternatives that I also kind of liked. Sterling Marte is one of them. Brian Reynolds for Pittsburgh is another. Andrew Benintendi for the Yankees is a little less expensive at $3,800. Reynolds is $4,100 as well. And then also Kyle Tucker at $4,600 for the Houston. Now keep in mind if you use Kyle Tucker because you might be using the Braves pitcher Morton. So just keep that in mind. If you do want to use him, then you might want to be careful with that. Then I have 2 very inexpensive cheap punt options that are decent today but not great. And one of those is Ben Gamel and Leody Taveras. Now I don't really recommend using either of these guys, but they are available. If they play, they're probably not the worst players that you could use. Ben Gamel here in Pittsburgh. He's got light home run potential, but he also just can hit the ball pretty well. And then also Leody Taveras. He's been hitting the ball pretty well. He's got a little bit tougher matchup, but he's a pretty good hitter. So, he's definitely somebody on the table. But overall, I'm probably going to stick in the $3,500 range for most of the guys of this, and maybe one more expensive dude. And then that's kind of how I'm going to round out the outfield. So that's pretty much all I have for this video. If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe below. If you have any questions, comments, or anything else you'd like me to cover when I do these videos, feel free to leave a comment below and let me know. And have a nice day.